Superman is finally here. Welcome to my spoiler-filled review of James Gunn's 2025 Superman movie. If you haven't seen it yet, now's a good time to click out because I'm about to talk about everything. The truth is, a lot is riding on this first movie from James Gunn to reboot the DC universe. James Gunn is who he is, which means he injected a ton of his humor throughout the whole movie. The thing about James Gunn's humor is sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's always overcrowded with jokes. We've seen the humor work in Guardians of the Galaxy, in Peacemaker, but when you're dealing with Superman, some humor is warranted, but not to the extent that James Gunn goes. I always feel like he takes it a few steps too far. Of course, the overall tone of this movie, for my taste, was too silly, too cartoony, too gimmicky. There was a lot of characters, a lot of things being introduced and thrown at you in this movie, which is exciting, but also overwhelming. And it did feel kind of overcrowded. You just don't get enough time to spend with the characters to get really invested. It's already established in this movie that all these characters are already operating in an existing world. In fact, at the beginning, it said, hey, for 300 years, we're getting all kinds of metas, all kinds of creatures and monsters. So that's the world that this movie is set in. Let's toss out the origin stories, which is a great relief, because we don't need to see origin stories again. We've seen them. We all know them at this point. Let's just cut to the chase and get right down to the action. Everything kept this movie upbeat and exciting, scene to scene. But unfortunately, all the silly quirks and jokes and gimmicks just knocked this movie down a few notches where I wish it didn't. Because it's simply not as epic or as much of a masterpiece as I was hoping for a Superman movie, let alone the first DC movie of this new universe. David Cornsweet as Superman. I thought he was generally very, very good. Now, I've seen David in other shows before they even announced him, and I thought to myself, man, that guy looks a lot like a young Henry Cavill. I bet he'd make a great Superman. And I was surprised that they actually casted him after that thought crossed my mind. He looks the part, he's tall, he got in shape to fill the suit. Let's talk about the suit for a second. When they first showed that image, I didn't love it. I thought it was too busy with the extra lines and details throughout the suit. I love that they brought back the red trunks. I think that's iconic. The plain yellow on the logo and on the belt and on the back of his cape, also great. This is more like the classic Superman that we all know and love. The texture of the suit was fine, but I think the thickness of the suit and the way it kind of folded over itself made it look more like a wetsuit. It just didn't look as well tailored as it could have been. But in reality, when you're watching the movie, he's moving around, he's doing a lot of action, and it looks fine. Clark Kent. You saw in the trailer, and you now saw in the movie, that he had his hair down in a completely different hairdo, along with the glasses and the clumsy demeanor. I was happy to see that nerdy, goofy Clark come back. Unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of screen time with this version of Clark. I think we're all going to grow to really love David Cornsweet as Superman. I think he embodies the character pretty well. He talks like a regular guy. He's very relatable. He's just like an average Joe. But on the flip side, I think when you're dealing with Superman, Superman has a certain persona, right? He is to be revered. He is the greatest hero, arguably, of all time. I think he's also, more importantly, a role model. As a role model, there's a way you need to carry yourself, as we saw depicted in, say, Christopher Reeve's Superman. Very polite, very respectful. The scene that really stood out to highlight what I'm talking about is, of course, his interview with Lois Lane in her apartment. I mean, I get that they're trying to convey that he was frustrated with the questions. And, you know, he's all about doing the right thing and saving lives, no matter what. It's as simple as that. It's black and white. Whereas Lois comes in, what are the consequences of that? Did you go through the channels? Because if not, things could get worse. I understand they're trying to show that frustration in the heat of the moment, but to hear him scream and hear that pitch in his voice and they see him stand up and throw a fit and lean back and roll his eyes and sigh. I just did not care to see my Superman act that way. It was childish. It was immature. He was a bit of a diva, just very sassy. Oh, come on, you know that one really irritates me specifically. And he storms off. And it's like, come on, chill, man. You're a superhero. You're an adult. Let's take it down a few notches. Let's talk about Superman and his need to keep everyone safe. That's great, right? That is what Superman is all about. So in the giant kaiju fight scene, you got the Justice Gang and Superman kind of working together to stop this new threat. You start seeing Superman save all kinds of people. So he saves the little girl. Great. He saves a dog. Okay, fine. And then he saves a squirrel. That to me was a little too tongue-in-cheek. Oh, look at that. It's so cute. He even saved a squirrel. So Superman got beat up a lot in this movie, which I think is totally fine. Because if he's super powerful and he's stronger than anyone he faces, it's not going to be a very interesting movie. The fights can be too short and there won't be much struggle. So you have Ultraman, you have the Engineer, people that can stand toe-to-toe with him. And turns out Ultraman is actually stronger. But they even told you at the beginning of the movie, hey, he's been doing this for 3 years and this is the first time he's lost a fight. To not make Superman overpowered was wise, because then you get a more interesting conflict. I still wish we had more Clark Kent at the Daily Planet. I think the interplay of him switching in and out from Clark Kent to Superman and back to Clark Kent is always part of the fun when watching Superman, and they just didn't really do that. You didn't even have the scene where he pulls the shirt apart and reveals the S logo. Yes, it's predictable, but it's so rewarding every time to see it. Rachel Brosnahan, never heard of her, never seen her work. She is an amazing Lois Lane. She embodied Lois Lane. Not only did she look the part with her long, dark hair, she embodied the humanity that is within Lois Lane. She was very empathetic through her facial expressions and her demeanor. So when she's interviewing Clark in his apartment, you see that she is the tough reporter when she needs to be. She's asking the tough questions. She's seeking the truth. I like that hard-nosed reporter aspect in play, but also she's vulnerable. Right? So when she's talking to Clark about their relationship, she's very much a human being and someone who is unsure of herself, unsure of the relationship. But also she's got a witty side to her, like when she was waiting for the garage to open. You have this spaceship, but you can't get a faster garage. And then there's that very gentle scene she had when she was in Clark's apartment, sharing the hot cocoa with him, and just asking him about their relationship and how they might not be a good match because she's punk rock and he's not really. I enjoyed that moment, especially with the background with all the things going on kind of nonchalantly. It just looked really beautiful at night and the colors, almost like fireworks. And they're just kind of calmly sharing the hot cocoa and expressing themselves, just like we've seen in real relationships. People have had that conversation in real life. It just felt so relatable to see them interact in that way. So I thought they did a good job building the relationship between Lois and Clark. Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. He looked the part. Shaved head, power suit, looked amazing. Nicholas did what he could with the performance, I thought, especially in the first half. So think about the scene in the Pentagon. He was in command of that room with all these other government officials and leaders, trying to convince them why they need to take out Superman. And he was so sharp that you just felt, okay, Lex is in control. He is smooth. He is authoritative. He's going to get what he wants by any means. But then later throughout the movie, he starts deteriorating from that presence and becomes almost more like Superman in terms of the whininess, losing his calm and just throwing a fit. And I just didn't care for that version of Lex either. So while we're on Lex, let's talk about the calling out of these codes during the fight so that Ultraman knew exactly what kind of punch to throw. I just was not a fan of any of that. I thought that was silly. If you created a clone of Superman who's supposed to be stronger, just let him do his thing. The specific calling out of numbers like a bingo card to tell him exactly what to do in exactly what moment because, oh, he's studied him for years, so he knows exactly what to do.
34B, 98Z, 4014!
I wish they would have just let them fight. Let's talk about the visuals, right? So this was a very stimulating movie as far as the visuals. From the action sequences to the flying to all the different colors and set pieces. And yes, it was filled with CGI, and some people might complain that it looked a bit too cartoony, which is a fair enough point, but I thought it looked generally very good and very dazzling. They did the flying in a very stylized fashion here. The camera was very close, kind of a fisheye angle, and you really felt the speed in which he was flying. It really immersed you into that simulation of feeling like you're flying. The best looking scene was when Superman showed up to Metropolis once everything started falling apart and caught that building to save that woman driving on that bridge all by herself. And the woman drives off, she turns around and she sees Superman in the cloud of dust. Then you have the most iconic shot of Superman just in his flying, hovering position looking over her. Best action scene, of course, will go to Mr. Terrific. Mr. Terrific had this Guardians of the Galaxy-like scene. James Gunn cues the quirky song, and you know something's about to go down. So Lois and Mr. Terrific show up to investigate or to save Superman, and he uses his T-spheres and just destroys this whole army base. Lois is a spectator to it all, being inside the force field, cameras moving around her, and she's seeing the spectacle that is Mr. Terrific just tearing him up. Mr. Terrific was probably the coolest and most interesting character of the whole movie, with that deep voice of his and that swagger. I liked how he interacted with Superman, because he was kind of like, really, bro? Like, I would watch a whole movie just about Mr. Terrific. Guy Gardner, perfectly casted. He pretty much embodies the entire tone and humor of James Gunn, because he's pretty much an a-hole. That is 100% right up James Gunn's alley. No offense, but we can't have your mug representing the Justice Gang. Then you got Metamorpho, who's like, Justice Gang? That's a cool name. Yeah, he's in. Hawk Girl, I mean, cool actress. You know, if you've seen her in The Last of Us, she's great. But she didn't really have much to do. She's just another member of this Justice Gang. She flew around and smashed things with the little scream thing that she does. I guess that's part of her character. I'm not really sure, but I just did not like that. I thought it was kind of weird. But I guess she did end up killing the leader of Baravia. So I guess that's something. Jimmy Olsen, you dog. So everybody seems to love Jimmy Olsen and his little character quirk of being this unassuming guy, but apparently is a ladies' man. It has this whole connection with Lex's girlfriend because he used to date her, whatever. I like Jimmy Olsen. I thought the actor looked great. He sounded great. He looked the part. Kind of a goofy, freckly guy. I don't like that they made him into somewhat of a womanizer. I like my Jimmy Olsen pure and innocent. Simple as that. Perry White's in the movie. Frank Grillo plays Rick Flag Sr., which is an awesome casting choice, right? We know him from Crossbones and Captain America. He's already voiced Rick Flag Sr. in the Creature Commando show, and he's just a cool actor. But here, he had a couple of scenes where he's talking to the government officials and Lex, and then he eventually arrests Superman and talks about how he doesn't have rights. But aside from that, he didn't do much. Hopefully he'll be an important character moving forward, but I just wish we got more screen time with him. I didn't really care for Krypto as much as I thought I would. I mean, I thought he was fine, but the way he was used was, oh, he's a bad dog, and he's not even Superman's dog. It's his cousin's dog, and he's just kind of watching the dog while she's out partying. You get some bits of him caring for the dog, at least enough to go rescue him, but he even says himself, like, he's not even a good dog, but he's alone out there. But instead of leaning into a relationship between a guy and his dog, which could have been pretty powerful emotionally, it was more of a foil, right? Because he was a bad dog, he kind of got in the way, he was annoying, and sometimes he would come and help out, and sometimes he would just cause issues. And it seemed to me that James Gunn was using him more as a comedic tool. There was that scene where he just thrashes Lex towards the end, just like Hulk did to Loki in the Avengers movie. Yep, same thing. So I thought the Justice Gang served their purpose in this movie, particularly when Superman was faced with a decision. Is he going to go over to this country at the border where they're about to invade, as these people are calling out for his help, or is he going to go to Metropolis and save this rift from happening? Well, they left you in suspense, right? Because they showed the destruction and things about to go down on both fronts, and then finally you see Superman choosing to save Metropolis. Well, what's going to happen with that border situation? Then you see that he called his buddies, the Justice Gang, and they showed up to back up Superman, because this highlights an important question. Superman cannot be everywhere at once saving everyone. Having the two conflicts happen at once justified the existence for the Justice Gang to be in this movie. So the plot felt a little undeveloped and kind of all over the place. But one of the central pillars was this whole social media cancel culture situation. It's kind of a commentary about how people just follow what they see and read online and just kind of go with it, which is topical. These are the kinds of aspects and elements that I just don't need to see in a superhero movie. To acknowledge social media and cancel culture in such a way that's so in your face kind of cheapens the fantasy of being in these movies. Yet that was such a pivotal way to keep this story going, right? Because you got Lex Luthor, who's trying to control the social commentary about Superman so he can take him down and get everybody to hate on him. People were so quick to turn on Superman and just forget about all the times that he saved them over the last 3 years. And then at the end, when the Daily Planet finally gets some evidence that Luthor had this big plan basically be the new king of Luthor. Then people quickly turned against him, called him a traitor, and said, oh, you know what? Superman's been the hero we all know all this time. But the footage of his parents was real, and they made that a point several times. Lex said it was real. Mr. Terrific said, oh yeah, they wouldn't have said it was real unless it was real. So are people just automatically not going to be suspicious of what Superman's real intentions are given that footage? The whole thing was just kind of a mess. The music. So of course we had to use some samplings of John Williams' famous and iconic Superman theme song from the Christopher Reeve movie. It wouldn't be complete without hearing at least some of that, which we got a lot of in different variations of it, so I was happy that they incorporated it. Now, James Gunn has a talent where they use a song that you would least expect and incorporate it into something dramatic or a really cool action sequence. And James Gunn did that several times here. We incorporated like some cool songs to create a very unique tone for that scene. So when Clark is back with his robots, hanging out at the Fortress of Solitude, they play the reels of the Kents because it soothes him. And the song that comes on is Punk Rocker, but it also was a callback to the discussion with Lewis about him not being punk rock enough and him thinking he is because he wants to make the relationship work and he wants her to believe that they're more similar than they're different. They can have so much meaning in that moment. I thought the fights were handled pretty well. They were exaggerated, but as can be expected for superpowered beings going at it. They're a bit cartoonish, but satisfying nonetheless. That one shot when he flew up with all those guys clinging onto him and did a super spin to shake him off, and then used his heat vision to just blast them while twirling like the Tasmanian devil. I mean, that's exactly what I would expect Superman to want to do all the time if you had that superpower, right? If I could just laser beam everybody, that's what I would be doing 99% of the time. One of my biggest issues with this movie was the pacing. It was so fast, so choppy, so jarring, transitioning from scene to scene. There wasn't a whole lot of logic or thought that went behind the editing. The movie would benefit more if it was a little bit longer, or if there's less stuff to address, less things being thrown at you, less characters to deal with, and if they had slowed down and provided some more character moments. We did get a few of them, but I felt like they needed to be more evenly dispersed throughout the movie. Once Lois and Clark returned to the Kent farm, we got perhaps the best scene of the entire movie. When Clark's in there eating a cereal barefooted, and Paul Kent comes out, tells him to scooch over. Clark is obviously distraught about this video, and he doesn't know who he is and thinks his parents have sent him here for nefarious purposes, and he's having an emotional breakdown. So Paul Kent does his thing as his father and tells him, it's your decisions that make you who you are. It's because of the love from the Kents that makes him the person that he is today. And when Paul Kent turns to Clark to tell him how proud he is for all the decisions that he's made and for what he's done, and he's holding back the tears, I mean, that was the best acting we've seen in this whole movie. Because it really tugged at your heartstrings, which James Gunn has proven he can convey that kind of emotion in his movies. I wish we got more of those aspects from James Gunn because I know he can do it. All right, let's talk about some of those end credit scenes. Supergirl! I loved Millie in House of the Dragon. I was so excited when they announced her as Supergirl because we need more Millie. When Supergirl came stumbling into the Fortress of Solitude with her perfectly matching Supergirl suit, I just loved her persona. I love that they're playing this angle of, well, she's out partying on the other planets with the Red Sun. And there's something fun about her being kind of this drunk mess of a girl, because I think that will lead to a much more interesting character arc for her. I'm of two minds, though, when she walks off and calls her cousin Superman a Yes, it was kind of funny. And yeah, I think it served to show what kind of character we're dealing with. But again, I really don't like treating Superman in such a way that's like, oh, he's a joke. We can step all over Superman. And that's just another example where we kind of just treat Superman like some schmuck. Will say that scene with Supergirl probably should have been saved for the very end because it was the best one. Those are most of my thoughts for this movie that just threw so much at us. So obviously there was a lot to discuss here. But I think this is probably going to be a very polarizing movie. So my overall rating for this movie is a 65%. I thought this movie was very exciting, very entertaining, and a fresh take on Superman. But it just didn't hit the chords that I wanted it to hit. And unfortunately, I do have high standards for a property like Superman. It could have easily been a great movie if we just approached it with a little bit more sincerity and reverence and seriousness and not lean too heavily on the jokes and the campiness. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Did you love this movie? Did you hate this movie? Did you think it was just okay? What was your favorite moment in this whole movie? Love to know your thoughts. I'll talk to you in the comments. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this analysis, and hit subscribe if you want to see more reviews like this. But for now, I'm signing off. Thank you for watching PK's Reviews.